have two candidates for county prosecutor, Michael Haas, James Kennedy. We had our coin flip. The two attorneys reached for the coin simultaneously, but I got it back. The winner was Michael Haas. He will make his 3-minute opening statement.
Thank you, everybody, for coming out. Thank you to the League. Thank you to the AAUW. This is obviously an important part of our civil processes. My name is Mike Haas. I'm your county prosecuting attorney. I've been your county prosecutor for 3.5 years now. I've been an attorney for a total of 30 years of that. Spent 15 years in prosecution, 11 doing criminal defense work, and another 4 years in a combination of civil / insurance defense. I'm not too proud of the insurance defense work. Sorry about that. I've lived in Jefferson County now for about 15 years. I'm married to Heather. I married way above my pay grade. And we have 4 wonderful children that, this thing has wheels. We have 4 wonderful children that we've adopted from Ethiopia at 3 different times, ages 9 through 15. We're very, very lucky people. I grew up in a small town in southeast Alaska, not unlike Port Townsend, a little town called Haines. And it was an artist community, a timber community at one point in time, and of course tourism. And it also has a fort, very much like Fort Worden out there. As your county prosecutor, I'm proud of a number of accomplishments that we've had in the office. One of the things that we've done is we're able to finally bring the Michael Pierce double homicide case to arrest at the Court of Appeals level and also through actions at the state Supreme Court. So that nightmare is over at this point in time. We have one of the things that's been very important to me, and when I ran for office, I wanted to bring the office into a more progressive environment for prosecutions, and so that's meant a focus on the therapeutic courts. So we've got 4 different therapeutic courts in Jefferson County: a drug court, a mental health court, a family therapeutic court, and a topside, which is provides wraparound services for juveniles. The prosecutor's office is responsible to act as the gatekeeper in 3 of those courts. And we've had some great successes. Drug court graduations have approximately doubled over what they were with the prior administration. And yet at the same time, we're also focusing on the serious cases, and prosecutions of sex offenders have more than doubled over the prior administration. One of the things that has occurred is you may hear some talk about turnover. Well, I've taken advantage of that, and I've brought together a team of one of the best units of attorneys that we've ever had in the county. We've got a combined level of experience of 117 years now. We've got former Los Angeles County District Attorney. Oh, time's up. Thanks.
All right, good evening, everyone. My name's James Kennedy. I'd like to thank the League and the AAU for putting on tonight's forum, and thank you everyone for showing up for that. Currently, I work in Clallam County as a deputy prosecutor, where I prosecute adult felonies in Superior Court. Before that, I worked here in Jefferson County, where I prosecuted misdemeanors, juvenile crimes, and also felonies or adult felonies in Superior Court. And prior to that, I worked in Yakima. I live here in Jefferson County with my wife and my 2 soon-to-be 3 kids, and before that, I was an officer in the United States Army. I say that because I've not been an attorney my entire life, but I've actually had a job that required leadership training and management experience. During that time, I had the opportunity to lead troops on 2 separate deployments to Iraq. I've been in charge of units ranging in size from 40 to 70 individuals, and I say that because the type of experience that you get from that, such as the administration, the leadership, and the management, is not something that you get from being an attorney. It's separate. And it's important because when we look at the prosecuting attorney's office over the last 3 years, I think that management and leadership and administrative experience are what we need the most. We have seen turnover approach 150%. The loss of institutional knowledge to the office has been devastating. Child support enforcement, one of the critical functions to the office, was allowed to lapse. The office has also been repeatedly fined by the Court of Appeals for not filing briefs on time. And this, quite frankly, has not gone unnoticed. I have the overwhelming support from members of our county staff, court staff, law enforcement, from our 2 chemical dependency treatment agencies, Safe Harbor and Believe in Recovery. I even have the support of some of our local defense attorneys. And what do these individuals and agencies have in common? These are the folks who have weekly, if not daily, contact with the prosecuting attorney's office. And they support me. And I think that speaks volumes because they have seen the change that has taken place in that county over the past 3 years. I am running because I think this county wants a candidate who's not afraid of accountability, but understands that compassion needs to be shown to those who have drug addictions and mental illness. This county wants a candidate who will put the needs of the community first and will treat crime victims with respect. This county wants a candidate who will show up to the office more than twice a week, and this county wants a candidate who will get in there, turn the office around, and start serving the public again. Thank you.
So now we'll take questions from those of you who have questions to ask. I'm going to read a question first. What training has the department done, if any, on implicit bias? Is this something you would consider doing for staff? That is, that training, and we'll start with James. And you can speak to this, speak into that, use your own microphone.
So when I worked at the Jefferson County Prosecuting Attorney's Office, there wasn't any training that was done on implicit bias. I have had some since I started working in Clallam County, but it tended to be more tangential to whatever the core training module was that we were working on at that time. And we've had some very good trainings on sexual assault, child abuse, and domestic violence. That said, implicit bias is something that we do all need to be trained on. We work very closely with law enforcement. We bring in jurors from the community. We select our jurors, and we also make charging decisions with respect to the crimes that are reported to us by law enforcement. And we have to evaluate that. We have to know what is a legitimate charge, which isn't, which case that we get might have involved some implicit bias. That said, look around. It's no secret here that this is an overwhelmingly white community that we live in. But that said, it is important that we make sure that everyone gets treated equally. We're not 100% white. We do have minorities here, and everyone needs to be treated equally at all levels of government, every step of the way, whether we're helping them as victims, whether we're prosecuting them, whether we're treating them as witnesses, or whether they're coming in as jurors to sit in. Thank you.
Michael Haas.
When I came into office, I inherited an all-male team of attorneys. Since I've been in office now, 50% of the attorneys in the office are female. So I think that that is partially why our sex offense prosecutions have increased. In terms of actual implicit bias, the training that we've had is somewhat limited. It's through the done through the Washington Association of Prosecuting Attorneys. All county prosecutors in the state are members of WAPA, and they are the go-to folks for the training. There's at times there's been an issue of training, but one of the difficulties that we have is there are 5 attorneys in the office, and so whenever a deputy goes out to training, that's 25% of the deputy prosecutors that have left the office. And obviously, if we've sent 2, then there's 50%. So we take advantage of the WAPA trainings that are available to us, and WAPA has had some great programs. I think that in terms of, as Mr. Kennedy alluded to, this area is predominantly white, and what we have here, the bias that we see coming into the court system, is actually a bias against the poor and the indigent. And that's a problem. Instead of targeting blacks or Latinos or things like that, you do see situations where the poor, particularly in different parts, more rural parts of Jefferson County, I wouldn't say they're targeted, but it's a problem that it does exist in the county. Hopefully, the deputies in the office have a great deal of experience in the world. They're all significantly experienced attorneys, and so they themselves, have had to deal with the issues of bias. Anyway, the biggest training does come through the Prosecutors Association.
Question in the back.
Hi. One of the candidates emphasized a lot of experience in a leadership position in the military. However, this is an attorney job, and so I'd like to know how much experience each candidate has supervising attorneys.
Michael Haas.
So I've supervised attorneys in 3 different offices. Obviously, the Jefferson County Prosecutor's office. I was part of a Seattle insurance defense firm that had a satellite office in Port Townsend. I supervised that office. And then I was a senior public defender in Okanagan County, and I supervised the felony attorneys in that office. I've supervised or mentored approximately 15 attorneys throughout my career. I have 3 veterans in my office, and I've asked them about this question. What's the correlation between military training and organization and supervision and a civilian law office? And they have pretty much, for the most part, said there is no correlation. Supervising attorneys, I like to say at times, particularly litigation attorneys, is like herding cats. They are intelligent people, they are hardworking people, and they have their opinions. And one of the things that we do encourage in our office is healthy debate. We try to push back on cases so that we have really vetted the case, the best resolution. And so a top-down type of administration doesn't really work, I don't believe, in a civilian law office. They're completely different types of entities.
James Kennedy.
So the fundamentals of leadership, management, administration are universal. They're not just something that one would find in the military, but the reason why I bring that up is because it was really such a fabulous experience to work with people from every continent except Antarctica, people from all walks of life, people who had grown up in villages without electricity, others who grew up in Manhattan, and getting all those people together in one area, working together as a team under adverse circumstances is just something that I will take with me for the rest of my life. It was truly a gift to have been able to have experienced that, and it's one of the greatest things I feel like I've ever done with my life. That said, that sort of leadership and management experience, once you've been focused or had to deal with some of the things that tend to be a little bit more difficult, hard, or adverse, it makes some of the more day-to-day things when it comes to managing an office a little bit easier to deal with. And it's not, even though it seems as though it's entirely top-down, it is not. A platoon leader is someone who comes right out of college, and they're paired with someone who has been an enlisted sergeant in the military for 15 years, okay? It's a collaborative effort. It's not just top-down. We work very closely together with everyone there, because with that many different people, that many different walks of life, with that many different backgrounds, you can truly have a great organization there because you have so many different perspectives, and that's what makes it such a wonderful experience to have that sort of inbuilt flexibility. That said, I don't have any experience supervising other attorneys per se, but that said, even self-starters and people who work hard, they still need direction. They still need structure within an office. They still need to understand what their job is, why they're there. Thank you.
Thank you. Next question, microphone in the back.
Thank you. I'm someone who sticks his nose in the county's budget frequently, and I want to inform everyone that 60% of the county's budget goes to criminal justice, the prosecutor's office, the courts, the sheriff's department. Now, Mr. Haas proudly admits he now has half his prosecutors as female since he's been in, but that means he's had 50% turnover since he's been in office. Management style and leadership are an important thing, and so is budgeting within the whole county network of all the 28 departments. How are both of you, from both of you, how are you going to manage working with the other departments budgetary-wise? And is 50% turnover a good thing? I have to question that just in a small county like this. Thank you.
Thank you for your question. James Kennedy.
All right, thank you. So it was a little bit closer to 150, and turnover happens. It happens in every office, but when it's everybody all at once and it's a continued revolving door, it's really a bad thing. You lose institutional knowledge. Small county governments like the kind that we have here in Jefferson County really live off the institutional knowledge that the employees bring in who've been working there for decades. We can't necessarily afford to bring in someone across country who's an expert in a certain field. We really need to have that knowledge here, stay here, and when that person leaves, do a timely transfer to whoever's going to take it over. And that loss really hurt the office. Now, with respect to the budget, it has to be collaborative. The thing is that we know that the sheriff's office is expensive, but they got lots of fancy equipment. The rest of the offices, I think, tend to be a little bit less expensive. I do have experience managing budgets. Everyone knows that the military gets a big fat budget, but the thing is, I was a logistics officer and no one cared about logistics. So I had to fight for every scrap of money, parts, and things like that I could, and manage it and make an effective team out of it. And I was able to do that time and time again. I believe in collaborating on money because robbing Peter to pay Paul doesn't help when we're all part of the same organization. We rely on the assessor, the treasurer, the auditor, the clerks, everybody to get our work done. Damaging one to help the other in the end will damage all the organizations there, and it makes everyone inherently weaker.
And Michael Haas.
So when you lose people, you have a challenge, and you also have an opportunity. We lost all 4 attorneys that I started out with in a fairly short period of time. And I don't know if I ever heard the full story or the full honest story of why that occurred. I suspect that it had to do with differences in the way in which we thought that cases should be prosecuted. I was elected, in my opinion, with nearly 62% of the vote, to take the office in a progressive direction, and with a greater emphasis on the therapeutic courts. There are others that I don't think shared that vision, and so they left. Fortunately, they were all able to find better paying jobs with other challenges. But we brought some great people in. My opponent, who was then, I think, a 3-year attorney, maybe a 4-year attorney, was replaced with an attorney with 20 years of experience as an assistant Los Angeles County District Attorney with gang prosecution experience and 17 murder prosecutions under her belt. That was a good thing for Jefferson County. Our chief deputy, chief criminal deputy, who had 5 years of experience, was replaced by a 20-year veteran with a ton of civil and criminal experience. Our civil deputy prosecutor was replaced by an all-star that is an all-star beyond all-stars. This guy, Phil Hunsucker, is the hardest working attorney I've ever encountered in my entire 30-year career. He is amazing, he is brilliant, and he has done great things for the county. So yes, there's been turnover, but we've also turned that into opportunity, and I think that we've done a really great job in terms of who we have in the office now. And there we go.
That microphone in the back looks rather lonely.
No.
No, it's not.
I have a question that you guys might be able to answer. Now, I'm assuming that Jefferson County is not going to get an official sexual assault nurse examiner anytime soon. So what I would like to know is there a workaround? Is there any way that you can prosecute somebody without that certified nurse, assuming that they've been accused of rape and there's pretty good evidence that they're responsible?
Michael Haas.
We wouldn't want to. Our office participates in a number of programs which involve working with law enforcement, working with Dove House, and we're utilizing best practices when it comes to that type of interviewing. The sheriff's candidate sort of alluded to this. The biggest problem with getting a SANE nurse in Jefferson County is the cost. It's my understanding, however, that there is an active effort coming out of the hospital right now to bring on board a SANE nurse. I hope that can happen, because the problem that we have is we do have to go down to Harrison Hospital for those services. That said, the people at Harrison are wonderful. They are extremely well experienced, and they do just an absolutely incredible job with one of the toughest areas that you can imagine to practice in. And it's tough enough with adults, but when you are working with children, it's just that much tougher. We have done, in particular with the sheriff's office, my chief deputy, Julie St. Marie, and Detective Shane Stevenson have partnered up and done some remarkable work with prosecutions of sex offenders. And those two actually are the ones that brought the net nanny operation to Jefferson County. That's a whole separate issue. Hopefully somebody will ask us what keeps you up at night. But in terms of prosecuting a case without a sexual assault nurse, I mean, sometimes you might have a situation where it's, you have to go forward without that because for whatever reason the SANE exam didn't happen. But if you have that information there, it makes your case just that much stronger. So they're very, very valuable to the law enforcement team. So.
And James Kennedy.
So just so everyone knows, you've heard now a couple of questions with respect to SANE exams and SANE nurses, and if you don't know, this is what is popularized in the media as rape kits. It's the same thing, but we call it SANE exams now. So these types of crimes are special because they require teamwork, and everyone has to know immediately. The prosecutor's office has to know before an arrest is made. We have to be there. We have to be involved with the forensic interview. I know one of the things that I want to do is get everyone trained as a forensic interviewer. I myself am one. This allows us to evaluate these things that when we observe law enforcement do it a little bit better. We need to get the Dove House involved and get the individual down to the SANE nurse. Now, having it in Harrison is somewhat of a mixed blessing for us because, yes, it is far away, but the team that they have down there is incredible. Their lead nurse, Kate Espy, is just one of the most incredible nurses and witnesses I have ever encountered. She truly is remarkable, and as long as I get to continue to work with her, I don't think of that as a bad thing. The drive is not good. Now, with all due respect to our sheriff's candidates, I'd better never, ever see a police report that ends with, and I told them to go get the SANE exam and I gave them directions. I do expect Jefferson's Finest Taxi Service to be providing that ride down there and making sure that it gets taken care of along with an advocate to be there with the victim. So until such time that we get one up here, and as was mentioned before, it is largely about money, we will be working with Harrison. Rest assured they have a great team, and I know we have a great ride service up here.
There is a question in the back.
So there are some in our country that believe that our criminal justice system is severely broken. It's prejudicial. It creates a lot of problems that it should be solving. So I'm wondering, could I get the viewpoint from each of our candidates? How does the prosecutor's office in Jefferson County work to better our overall criminal justice system?
James Kennedy.
Within this county, we have sort of a trifecta that's driving a lot of the criminal activity here. It's mental health, it's chemical dependency, and it's poverty. And a lot of it is all three combined. Working closely with our therapeutic courts to get these individuals enrolled, to get them with the treatment that they need, I think is a great way that we can get involved in these individuals' lives, try to rehabilitate them, and put them on a path that will keep them outside of the criminal justice system in the future. That means having a close working relationship with our mental health providers and our chemical dependency providers, as also having a great working relationship with our local law enforcement. So that way, when they see so-and-so walking down the street again, they go, oh, I know that guy. He's in mental health court. So rather than necessarily arresting them right away, they can call up their counselor, or they can call up the prosecutor's office, and the prosecutor's office can call up the counselor. We can call up the defense attorney, and we can work together to get these individuals into a stable environment that is maybe something not jail. That said, not everyone wants treatment or can be treated, and right now we have a lot of gaps in our system that aren't really taking that into account so much. We have a system in the United States that is inherently reactive. As was mentioned before during the Sheriff's Forum, all the money that gets put into the Sheriff's Office, that is all to deal with the problem after it's happened, and we don't have a lot of money to put into the problem before it happens. That's somewhat structural, and I don't know if there's a lot that the prosecutor's office can do that, but I would certainly like to see that at the state level, greater funding for drug abuse and mental health. Thank you.
Michael Haas.
Our criminal justice system certainly is not perfect. I think that one of the things that we've done in my administration is we've tried to focus on two sets of types of cases. One where treatment is going to work, and one where we need to push harder for incarceration if that's appropriate, and that would be typically in the sex offense cases. One of the things that Washington State has done quite well is, and if you look at what's happening in other states, 70% of the people that are in prison now are there for violent or sex offense crimes. The other 30% are for drug crimes or nonviolent crimes. That's far better. That's a far better ratio than you're going to see in other states. So we've done some good things there. That has been done by our legislature through the mechanism by which we use the sentencing guidelines. In terms of the problems that we face here on a daily basis, and some of you may be aware of a stabbing that we had recently involving mentally ill and homeless individuals. That's a problem. Sheriff Stanko has frequently said that he has the largest mental health facility in the county, and he also runs, he doesn't say this as much, but he also runs the largest addiction program in the county. One of the things that he and I are trying to do right now is we're trying to work with the health department to bring in medically assisted treatment into the jail. There's some litigation going on in Whatcom County right now, where that county jail has been sued, arguing that people are not having access to medically assisted treatment for their overdose or for their substance abuse problems. We're trying to get ahead of the curve and bring that into the county jail. The continued emphasis on the therapeutic courts is probably one of the best things that we can do to try to resolve some of the problems that exist in our criminal justice system. Thank you.
I don't see anyone at the microphone. Dale Spears, are there any more written questions? Not as of a minute ago. Well, then I'll ask a question. Yeah, the question is, what are the costs and the benefits to us as citizens, as victims, and even as defendants from such a high proportion of criminal cases being settled by plea bargain rather than in trial? And Michael starts this.
No county or state that has tried to abandon plea bargaining has been successful. When I was running the last time around, I did some research into this area, and the reality is that our office receives, we're a small office, so again, five attorneys, and one of those is tasked to civil, and I primarily handle appeals, so that means really we've got 3 attorneys. We have 1,400 criminal cases that come in every year. We probably charge between the felonies in Superior Court and the District Court cases. We probably charge around 800, 900 cases, also juvenile court. So we probably charge 800, 900 cases a year. So do the math. It can't be done. It's just impossible. So that's one of the reasons why your plea bargaining policies are so important. And in fact, the ACLU has made some fairly great criticism of prosecutors' offices as being a place where there's very little supervision. And in fact, the only supervision we have over the charging decisions that we make, the plea bargaining policies that we implement, comes from you every 4 years. So, you know, the judges don't control the policies that I make. In terms of charging or settling cases, the commissioners have no control over that, other than perhaps the fact that they control my budget. But the reality is that plea bargaining is a necessary evil. And unless we're willing to spend the millions and millions and millions of dollars to bring in more judges, to create more courthouses, we're going to be stuck with the situation we have. Approximately 95% of all cases are settled through a plea bargain.
It is so difficult for me not to ask a follow-up question, but I won't. James Kennedy.
Maybe next time.
There will be a next time on the video.
So this is how the vast majority of the business in our field gets done. And I know some people don't like it. It's kind of just the dirty truth. What I hope that the community is getting out of it is a better product, though. We simply wouldn't have the resources to take every case to trial. That's costly, it's time consuming. With plea bargaining, we can resolve cases quicker, we can work in resolutions that focus on alternatives to incarceration like community service, treatment, other forms of rehabilitation and probation in the felony world. The Sentencing Reform Act says certain crimes get probation and certain crimes don't. So I might have an individual who has a drug problem who committed crime X. And if I take him to trial on crime X and I convict him of it, I don't have any probation available to me at all. Or I might be able to plea bargain that down to a different crime that's semi-related that has less time, and I do have probation, and I will be able to ask that person to do drug treatment. So I don't like the way our SRA is worded, but when some crimes simply have no probation at all, no ability to get someone mental health treatment or drug treatment, yes, yeah, I'm going to take advantage of our ability to plea bargain and try to get resolutions that focus on rehabilitation. Sometimes it doesn't work out. Sometimes we can't come to an agreement. Sometimes the facts or the charges are simply too egregious, but most of the time we're able to use the law, I think, to a way that's going to benefit everyone at a cheaper cost, make it more efficient, and focus on things other than just simply incarceration.
And we do have someone in the back. I was thinking that I would have to call. I know many of you here. I was thinking I could call on someone, but I don't have to do that in the back.
I wonder if each candidate could tell us how many years' experience they have working as a prosecuting attorney and how many years' experience they have working as a criminal defense attorney.
It's James, I believe.
Well, I've never been elected prosecuting attorney, so I've never been a prosecuting attorney. That said, I have worked in prosecution for 7 years, and it just so happens that the job I'm running for is that of prosecutor. I am not running for the county's chief defense attorney. That said, I have many good friends who are defense attorneys. I've always had a great working relationship with defense attorneys. I have to. These are the people I see every day when I come to work. I have to negotiate resolutions with them. And so it pays to get along with individuals and try to collaborate and come to agreements that everyone has some buy-in on. That said, I don't have experience as a defense attorney. This is where all of my training is. This is what I want to do. I think it's an important public service, and I do not think that you need to have prior defense experience in order to be a good prosecutor. Some people do, many, many do not.
And Michael Haas.
Thank you. In addition to the 15 years of experience in prosecutions I mentioned earlier and the 11 years of experience as defense counsel, I also have civil experience. And one of the things that people forget sometimes is that in Washington State, the prosecuting attorney is really two offices. If you imagine a district attorney's office combined with county council. That's what the prosecuting attorney does here. So we represent the interests of the people of the state of Washington in criminal cases, and that takes up about 80% of our caseload. And I do think that the ability to analyze a case from a defense perspective is very, very valuable. I wish that we could have a camera on the wall sometime watching what goes on in our office when we're analyzing some of the difficult cases that we have. And some of the cases are difficult because they are morally difficult. Some of them are difficult just because of the fact pattern that you have. You got a child involved, and quite frankly, they're just the worst that you can think of. But we also have the civil side of the office, and 80% is criminal, 30% is civil. Now, do you think I screwed up on my math? I didn't. The fact is that our civil side is drastically under-supported at this point in time. And so I've also got civil experience, so I can provide meaningful input to my civil deputy on issues that crop up involving county and civil litigation. One of the things that I do, I think that is really great, is we've got an incredibly collaborative team, and we have that experience. You need to have that experience to kick around ideas adequately, and it's through that collaborative process that we make the best decisions. And the best way to get to the best decisions is to have more and more experience rather than less.
The last question goes to Doug Milholland.
Greetings. My greatest concern at this point in the United States, our national journey, is the growing military-industrial budget and the fact that we live next to the West Coast's largest weapons transfer depot. Quite frankly, I'm concerned that a former officer in the military will be predisposed to look at people involved in civil protest asking for a change of course in our national journey towards peaceful resolutions and away from such deep allegiance to military-industrial global dominance. I'm just curious, how can you be a servant for people who are making the kinds of decisions to stand up in front of a weapons transfer depot and say, please lock this gate? I mean,
Thank you, Doug. That's a good question. We'll start, that's really a question for James Kennedy. We'll start with him. Michael Haas can ponder how he might want to answer.
All right, so I'm going to let you in on a dirty little secret. I was commissioned as an officer in the United States Army in May 2003. In February 2003, before I was commissioned, myself and my roommate drove down to Manhattan and participated in the nation's largest protest against the Iraq War. So I knew I wanted to serve my country, and a dumb policy decision wasn't going to stop that, but it didn't mean I agreed with the dumb policy decision. I know you're concerned about someone like me. How would I treat protesters? Well, I also actually happen to be a card-carrying member of the ACLU and have been for 12 years. Or not 12 years, sorry, since 2012. So civil rights is what we protect. It's the reason why some of us, myself included, joined the military, is to protect those rights, to protect protest. And now I find myself in a different form of public service. Public service is my calling. It is to serve everybody, and it is to serve all of their civil rights. And it's to make sure that everyone's rights are observed. So just because the path I've taken involved military does not mean that I'm especially militant. All right, please understand that. Thank you.
And Michael Haas.
It's a tough question, Doug. I'll tell you what has scared me in the past, and still is a concern, is the growing militarization of civilian law enforcement agencies. I think that what Sheriff Stanko did when he got rid of that piece of war equipment, it was the right thing to do morally and as a practical matter. I know that he lost some support from some of the troops, but I think it was the right thing to do. When you've got folks protesting out at the #1 weapons depot for the West Coast of the United States, we have to make sure that their rights are protected. The flip side is, as a prosecutor, you can't just walk away from the prosecution of criminal cases. You do have that discretion, and that's why it's really important who you elect into office, because you do have that whole plea bargaining and charging policy issue that I talked about before. Sometimes it involves looking at the what are the rules out there? What actually constitutes trespassing? For example, out at Indian Island, the Navy's painted blue stripes, claiming certain property out there as U.S. government property. It's not. It belongs to the county. And so part of protecting the citizenry is simply being knowledgeable about the actual facts that you have to work with. In terms of how we're going to solve those issues, I'm not sure it's going to happen in this race particularly, but I've tried to be very tolerant while at the same time protecting the rights of others, and that can be a very delicate dance at times.
Michael Haas and James Kennedy each get a 3-minute closing statement. The flip of the coin says that James Kennedy leads off.
All right. Oops. So I want to thank everyone again for coming out tonight. In this race, there is a choice. We have an individual who is an active litigator of criminal cases, who is not scared to take the tough cases to trial, who doesn't mistreat victims of sexual assault, and works closely with law enforcement to make sure the job gets done and the job gets done correctly. 30 years of experience did not stop the office from having to find an outside attorney at the cost of thousands of dollars to settle the Pierce case. Active litigation experience is what you need to handle cases, not just time under your belt. The office also needs someone with active management and leadership experience to take the office, which I used to work at, and I worked with many of the individuals who are there now, and give it some direction, to train them. I have a vision to make that office into specialists. Specialists in traffic offenses, sex crimes, child abuse, and domestic violence. Those are the crimes that afflict this community the most, and we can do that by sending our folks to training that takes place around the country. A lot of this training does not come at an exorbitant cost. Some of it's free, some of it's grant funded, some of it we can work closely with entities like the Dove House, and they can provide the money for it. That was the case in Clallam County when our Dove House equivalent called Healthy Families sent 9 individuals of prosecutors and law enforcement to the National Child Advocacy Training Center in Huntsville, Alabama for a week of training. That was nothing short of remarkable. We can send people to the Washington Homicide Investigators Conference that happens every spring. We can send people to the ICAC, which is Internet Crimes Against Children, which is another way of saying kiddie porn. That's actually can be a pretty complicated type of crime to prosecute because you have to know a lot about computers. A lot of times people use drop boxes and things on the internet. You have to get training on that. It can't just be the detective, it has to be the prosecutor. They have to know how to explain that stuff to a jury. These are all types of training conferences that my current office sends people to. So we have people that are specialized. And like I mentioned before about the forensic interview training, that's another one. Jefferson County doesn't do that. They don't send people there. They're not specializing. And if you don't know the best practices right now, how are you supposed to keep up? How are you supposed to keep up when the law changes? We have multiple levels of government, multiple levels of a judiciary. They're constantly messing with the laws. You have to keep up on that stuff. And it requires being an active participant in our legal and law enforcement community. So that is my vision with the prosecutor's office, is to really get the folks trained on the things that afflict this community, to turn us into a bunch of specialists so we can get the job done. Thank you.
And Michael Haas.
So the good thing is, the good news, is that office already exists. That's what we have in the Jefferson County Prosecutor's Office. We have a team of attorneys with 117 years of experience. We exercise and utilize best practices. We have a phenomenal group called ORCA, the Organized Response to Child Abuse. Our office actively participates in that. We are involved in JOIN, the Juvenile Offender Information Network. Our office actively participates in that. We're involved in the DART project, which involves domestic abuse. We're bringing that back to life at this point in time. The Clallam County Prosecutor's Office, I'm not sure what the numbers are, but I think they're at least 3 times as large as the Jefferson County Prosecutor's Office in terms of actual numbers of deputy prosecutors. In the fantasy world, it would be great to send my attorneys to training every single week. I'd love to do that. But the reality is small offices just don't work that way. If you take, for example, the number of attorneys I have, multiply that by 3-4 days of training every year, multiply that by sick leave, multiply that by vacation time, you suddenly realize that you have lost half of an FTE in an office that is already still down from where we were in 2008. In 2008, we had 12 FTEs, 12.5 FTEs. Right now, we're down to 11 FTEs, including myself. And the caseload has not gotten smaller. So there are some practical realities associated with training. We send folks to training as much as we possibly can, and I think that we are doing one hell of a great job for the citizens of Jefferson County. Specialization. The family of the victim in the Pierce case, they wanted a 5-year attorney to handle the appeal in that particular case. He had 1, 2, maybe 3 appeals under his belt. I went out, I outsourced it. I thought about doing it myself. At that point, I think I had about 25 appeals under my belt to the Court of Appeals or to the State Supreme Court. We outsourced it, and we outsourced it to an attorney with over 200 appeals under his belt, and we won. And I think that the $12,000, $14,000 that we spent was well worth it to have that kind of quality. I went to a training a bunch of years ago, and there were some King County deputy prosecutors talking. And the King County Deputy Prosecutor's Office in the child support section, which is alive and functioning quite well in Jefferson County. I don't know where my opponent's information is coming from, but that in King County they have 4 separate units in the child support unit. We don't have that kind of luxury. We are all generous. We have to be generous. Our felony deputies are. Thank you so much for coming out. I really appreciate it.
Well, that's almost all there is to say. I want to thank our candidates for being candidates and for being here. Michael Haas, James Kennedy, Joe Knoll, and David Stanko. I want to thank the League of Women Voters and the American Association of University Women. I hope I got that all right. I did indeed. That's a surprise to me, kind of. Sheila Murphy from the first, Catherine Buchanan from the second, and I forgive her for stealing my notes. Thanks to David Engbrecht and Sonny Flores for managing the sound, and especially, before you all run out of the room, thanks to all of you. This has been a fun evening for me.